Today we are going to learn how to solve one-sided and two-sided limits using a graph and without a graph. So to begin with, when examining the graph of this type of function, we want to look at the limit of f of x as x approaches 3. But to solve that, we need to first figure out the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 from the left side, which is determined with this negative here coming this way, and looking at the limit of f of x as x approaches from the right side of this way. So first step is looking at the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 from the left side. So when examining our graph, you would find where 3 is, come to this side of the equation, and follow it from the left side. As you can see, it keeps going and going and going until it stops here at a number. This number is represented by 4. So the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 from the left side, which like I said before is represented by this negative, equals to 4. Now the next step would be to examine the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 from the right side, which is determined by this plus here. So we come to the graph once again. We go from find 3 and follow the graph as it approaches from the right side, and we see that that number comes to 1. So the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 from the right side is going to be equal to 1. Now, when we examine the limit of f of x from the left side and the limit of f of x from the right side, we notice that there are two different numbers here. So in that case, the limit of f of x as x approaches 3, notice how there is no plus or minus sign, which would determine that we are examining both from left and right. They both do not equal to each other. Therefore, the limit of f of x as x approaches 3 does not exist. When examining one-sided limits from the equation, you want to remember that we're only going to be examining limits from the left side as the limit of a function approaches, as x approaches a number with this negative value, meaning it's coming from the left side. And we're also examining the right side as the limit of a function as x approaches a with the positive thing, which means it's coming from the right side. So now we're going to be examining the limit of this function as x approaches 3 from the right side without a graph. At first, when first looking at this, you may assume that you may plug in 3 to this equation, but you may notice plugging in 3 would give the denominator a number that equals 0, and anything over 0 does not exist. So what we can do is notice how we can factor the top equation to factor it out and hopefully find something that'll cross out. So when we factor the top equation, we get x plus 3 times x minus 3 over x minus 3. Notice how there is an x minus 3 and an x minus 3 both at the top and the bottom, meaning that we can cancel both of these out. When we cancel these out, our new limit is going to be the limit of x plus 3 from what was left over here as x approaches 3 from the right. Now that we have done that, it is now just a matter of direct substitution, which will give us an answer of 6. So the limit of x approaching 3 from the right of this function is equal to 6. Now when examining our next problem, the limit of this function as x approaches 1 from the left side, it is vital that we understand that this problem can only be done with a limit from approaching one side, and here's why. When we're approaching 1 from the left side, we are looking at numbers such as 0.98 or 0.998. But when we're examining numbers from the right side, we're looking at numbers such as 1.01 or 1.0001. Now, looking at these numbers here, if we were to plug in any number that is greater than 1 into this equation, it would be 3 minus a greater number than 3, giving us a negative in the equation inside the square root, which cannot work. Our next step then would be to rewrite this equation by factoring out a 3 from the inside of the square root. Now what we're looking at here is essentially this piece here wants to get as closest to 0 as possible. When plugging in the 1, we would then get the square root of 3 times 0, which then would give us the square root of 0, and then that answer would be 0.